The Grand Duel arena hung in the void like a frozen soap bubble, translucent dome walls shimmering with force fields, beneath them nothing but stars and the distant glow of Nexus Prime's orbital rings. Inside, two figures stood 100 meters apart on polished obsidian. One was Warlord Kael'thar, his four-armed frame draped in ceremonial armor that gleamed like spilled mercury, plasma blades humming twin violet crescents in his upper hands. The other was Cadet Mira Chen, human, 23 standard years, her regulation academy jumpsuit patched at the elbows, her right hand resting on the worn leather grip of a knife strapped to her hip, a blade forged on Earth 2 centuries before humanity ever touched the stars. Kael'thar tilted his crested head and his translator crackled with laughter. "You bring that to face me?" Myra's breath fogged the inside of her helmet visor as she adjusted the strap across her chest. Around the arena's perimeter, holographic galleries filled with delegates from 37 council species, Vorath diplomats with their chittering mandibles, Seraphine observers folding and unfolding their luminous wings, even a trio of cold-eyed Terragov officials from the human embassy. They'd all come to watch the warlord reassert dominance after 3 contested border skirmishes. The duel was law older than the council itself, 1 champion per side, single combat, terms binding across all signatories. Myra had volunteered not because she wanted glory, but because no one else would. She unsheathed the knife. It was plain carbon steel, blade length 20 centimeters, crossguard worn smooth by generations of thumbs. Her great-grandfather had carried it through the collapse, the years Earth spent rebuilding after the contact wars. When humanity joined the Council, most Earth-forged weapons were classified as historical artifacts, inefficient, unsafe, banned from active duty. Myra had smuggled this one onto her Academy transport in a false-bottom duffel. Now it caught the arena's ambient glow, reflecting white pinpricks of starlight along its edge. Kael'thar's laughter rolled through the dome's acoustics. The human child brings her ancestors' dinner knife to the Grand Duel, his lower hands spread in a theatrical shrug. "Council, I offer her withdrawal with honor. This is beneath us both." Myra's jaw tightened. She toggled her helmet's external mic. "I'm not withdrawing, then you choose death." Kael'thar ignited his second pair of plasma blades with a flourish, 4 glowing arcs now, each one capable of slicing through starship hull plating. "I will make it swift." She didn't answer. Instead, she checked her footing on the obsidian, felt the slight magnetic pull of the arena's gravity plating through her boots, and centered her breathing. The Academy had trained her in zero-G knife work, boarding drills, close-quarters defense against armed opponents. None of that training covered energy weapons. Plasma blades didn't cut, they vaporized. Block 1 and you'd lose the limb before pain registered. The arena's referee, a floating orb of crystalline lattice, pulsed once. "Combatants ready." Its voice was melodic, dispassionate. "Lethal force authorized. Duel begins on my mark." Myra shifted her grip. The knife's handle was warm from her palm. She thought of her great-grandfather's journal, the one entry she'd memorized. "Steel doesn't lie. It breaks or it holds. So do we." The referee pulsed 3 times, rapid. "Mark." Kael'thar surged forward, plasma blades shrieking as they cut the air. Myra dropped into a low crouch and rolled left. The warlord's first strike carved a glowing trench across the obsidian where she'd stood, molten stone hissing into vapor. She came up running, angling wide to keep distance. Kael'thar pivoted with predatory grace, his 4 arms moving in coordinated arcs. 2 blades high, 2 low, a cage of light closing in. She feinted right, then lunged left, closing the gap. Kael'thar's lower right blade slashed horizontally. Myra ducked under it, felt the heat scorch her back, and jabbed upward with the knife. The blade skittered off his chest armor with a metallic screech. No penetration. His hide was reinforced polymer, military grade. Kael'thar laughed again and backhanded her with 1 armored fist. The impact sent her tumbling across the arena floor, helmet cracking against obsidian. Her vision starred. She tasted copper. When she looked up, the warlord was pacing toward her, blades lowered but still humming. "Brave," he said, almost gently, "but foolish." Myra pushed herself upright, her left shoulder throbbed, the knife was still in her hand, blade unmarked. Around the perimeter, the holographic galleries murmured, Vorath clicking in disapproval, Seraphine rustling wings. In the human section, she caught a glimpse of Ambassador Kael'thar, face pale, hands clenched. Kael'thar raised his upper right blade for a killing stroke. "Your species fought well in the contact wars. You earned your council seat." But you remain soft, human. Your steel is history. This, he gestured with the plasma arc, is the future. Mira met his gaze through her cracked visor. Then why are you talking? He blinked, translator stuttering mid-response. She didn't wait. She sprinted forward, not away, straight into his reach. Kael'thar reflexively brought both upper blades down in a scissor cut. Mira threw herself into a slide, boots first, passing beneath the cross. She twisted mid-slide, came up behind his left leg, and drove the knife into the joint seam of his knee armor. The blade bit deep. Kael'thar roared, a sound like tearing metal, and staggered. His lower left blade swung wild. Mira yanked the knife free and rolled clear, blood dark violet, almost black, spattering the obsidian. The galleries erupted. Vorath delegates were on their feet, mandibles clattering. Seraphine observers flared their wings in alarm. The human section was silent, frozen. Kael'thar steadied himself, favoring his wounded leg, and stared at the blood pooling beneath his boot. Then he looked at Mira. His eyes, three of them arranged in a triangle across his face, narrowed. You cut me. Mira kept her guard up, knife slick with his blood. Yeah, for a long moment neither moved, then Kael'thar's mandibles parted in what might have been a smile. Perhaps, he said slowly, your steel is not history after all. He charged. This time he didn't toy with her. All four blades came in coordinated strikes, high, low, left, right, a storm of plasma that turned the air itself incandescent. Mira gave ground, deflecting with footwork, never trying to block directly. Her academy instructor's voice echoed in her memory. Against superior reach, you make them chase. Tire them. Wait for the mistake, but Kael'thar wasn't tiring. He was learning. Each pass came faster, tighter, cutting off her angles. A blade tip grazed her left arm, searing through jumpsuit fabric to scorch skin. She bit down a scream, kept moving. Another strike clipped her thigh, left a blackened line across her leg. The pain was white-hot, immediate. She stumbled. Kael'thar pressed in, upper blades scissoring again. This time she couldn't slide under. She raised the knife not to block, but to intercept. The plasma blade met the steel edge head-on. There was a sound like a thunderclap swallowed by vacuum. The plasma blade shattered. Violet energy exploded outward in a cascade of sparks, the emitter in Kael'thar's hilt crackling and dying. His upper right hand held nothing but a smoking handle. Silence flooded the arena. Kael'thar stared at his ruined weapon. Then at Mira's knife, unmarked, still gleaming. The galleries had gone utterly still. Even the Vorath had stopped clicking. Mira's hands were shaking. She didn't understand what had just happened. Plasma weapons didn't shatter, they cut through everything. Steel shouldn't have held, but it had. Kael'thar extinguished his remaining 3 blades. The sudden absence of their hum left the dome eerily quiet, just the faint thrum of the force field walls. He straightened to his full height, nearly 3 meters, and studied her. What is that blade? Mira's throat was dry. Carbon steel, forged on Earth, that's all. No. Kael'thar's voice was flat, certain. Council energy weapons are tuned to molecular disruption frequencies. They break atomic bonds. Nothing organic or metallic should resist them. He gestured at the knife. Yet your blade does not even show scorch marks. She looked down. He was right. The edge was clean, almost mirror bright. No discoloration, no warping, as if the plasma had never touched it. Around the perimeter, the holographic galleries erupted into chaos. Delegates were shouting over one another, translators overlapping into white noise. The Teragov officials were on their feet, one of them already tapping a wrist comm. Ambassador Akafar's face had gone from pale to stricken. The crystalline referee pulsed urgently. Duel suspended pending council review. Combatants will hold position. Kael'thar ignored it. He took 3 slow steps forward, limping slightly on his injured leg, and stopped just outside Mira's striking range. His 3 eyes locked onto hers. How did your ancestors forge such a weapon? Mira's pulse hammered in her ears. She thought of her great-grandfather's journal, the entries about the collapse, famine, blackouts, the years Earth spent cut off from galactic trade. Humanity had rebuilt with what it had: coal, iron, sweat. No plasma forges, no molecular printers, just heat and hammer and generations of trial. We didn't know any better, she said quietly. We just made what worked. Kael'thar's mandibles clicked softly, not laughter this time, something else. Respect maybe, or unease. He retracted his remaining blade emitters, all 3 handles maglocking to his belt, and lowered himself onto one knee. The gesture sent a ripple of shock through the galleries. I concede the duel. The dome's force field shimmered and split open, admitting a procession of council enforcers, silver-armored seraphine with stun pikes, a quartet of Vorath combat drones hovering in formation. They formed a perimeter around Mira and Kael'thar as the crystalline referee descended, pulsing red. Cadet Chen, surrender the weapon for inspection. Mira's hand tightened on the knife's grip. This is my property. It is evidence of prohibited technology. The referee's tone remained melodic, but there was an edge now. Council Ordinance 447 forbids the deployment of unregistered energy-resistant materials in sanctioned combat. It's a knife. Mira held it up, let the light catch the blade. Steel, iron, and carbon, you can scan it. One of the Vorath drones floated closer, its sensor array cycling through spectrums, infrared, ultraviolet resonance imaging. After a moment, it emitted a sharp click and withdrew. The referee pulsed twice, uncertain. Composition reads as stated: carbon, steel, trace chromium, no exotic elements, no energy shielding detected, no molecular lattice anomalies. The orb rotated to face Kael'thar. Warlord, your plasma blade was manufactured to council standards. Full charge, no defects recorded. Explain its failure. Kael'thar rose to his feet, his injured leg leaving a faint trail of violet blood on the obsidian. I cannot. The blade met the steel edge. It shattered. He gestured at the scorch marks on the arena floor, the trench from his first strike. My other blades functioned perfectly against stone, but against her weapon, he shook his head. Something resisted the disruption field. The galleries had quieted, but the tension was palpable. Mira could see clusters of delegates leaning toward one another, murmuring. The Teragov officials were in heated discussion with someone off-screen, likely the human military command. Ambassador Kael'thar stepped forward from the gallery projection, her hologram flickering as she crossed the threshold into the arena floor. She was a tall woman, silver-haired, face etched with decades of diplomatic service. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who negotiated Earth's first council treaties. Referee, I request temporary adjournment. This matter exceeds the scope of the duel and requires technical review. The orb pulsed acknowledgement. Adjournment granted. Combatants will report to medical isolation. The weapon will be held in council custody pending analysis. Mira's stomach dropped. You can't, cadet. Kael'thar's tone was gentle but firm. Let them take it. It's mine. It belonged to my family. I know. The ambassador's eyes met hers, and Mira saw something there, not anger but fear, carefully controlled fear. But if you resist, you'll give them grounds to declare the duel void and charge you with smuggling banned weapons. Let it go. We'll get it back. Mira looked at the knife in her hand. The blade had been her tether to Earth, to the years before the Academy, before the stars. Giving it up felt like surrendering a piece of her spine. But Kael'thar was right, she had no leverage here. Slowly, Mira reversed her grip and held the knife out, hilt first. One of the Seraphine enforcers stepped forward, extending a containment case, transparent polymer, lined with sensor nodes. Mira placed the blade inside, the case sealed with a soft hiss. The enforcer's wings rustled as it lifted off, carrying the knife toward the arena's upper access port. Mira watched it go, fists clenched at her sides. Kael'thar's voice was quiet beside her. They will not find what they seek. She turned. The warlord was being tended by a medical drone, his leg wound sealed with biofoam. He looked at her, mandibles still. That blade is not technology, it is something older, something we forgot how to make. Medical isolation turned out to be a sterile white cube anchored to Nexus Prime's orbital ring, walls humming with antiseptic fields. Mira sat on the edge of a gel mattress bed while a diagnostic drone circled her, scanning for plasma burns and fractures. Her left arm was bandaged where Kael'thar's blade had grazed her, and her thigh throbbed beneath a dermal patch. Nothing serious, nothing that wouldn't heal in a week. Through the cube's single viewport, she could see the curve of Nexus Prime below, a ringed gas giant, bronze and amber, with the Council's central station strung along its equator like a chain of pearls. Somewhere in that sprawl, her knife was being scanned, probed, dissected by analysts who'd spent their careers cataloging energy signatures and molecular structures. The door irised open. Ambassador Kael'thar stepped through, followed by a younger man in Teragov uniform, Commander Zhao. Mira recognized him from Academy briefings. He was head of human military liaison to the Council. Kael'thar pulled a chair close to the bed and sat heavily. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a warlord, Mira said, which I did. Zhao didn't smile. He stood with his arms crossed, jaw tight. Cadet Chen, where did you acquire that knife? It was my great-grandfather's. We need details, forge location, date of manufacture, metallurgical records. I don't have those. Mira met his gaze. He carried it during the collapse, that's all I know. Zhao's expression darkened. That's not sufficient. Commander, Kael'thar's voice was calm but carried an edge. She's not on trial, not yet. Zhao turned to the ambassador. But if the council determines that blade is a weapon designed to bypass energy defenses, it's a kitchen knife, Mira interrupted. My great-grandfather used it to gut fish in Lake Superior. When the contact wars ended, he kept it because it reminded him of home. That's the whole story. Zhao opened his mouth to respond, but Kael'thar raised a hand. Enough, Commander, step outside. Ambassador, outside. Zhao's jaw worked, but he obeyed, the door irising shut behind him. Kael'thar leaned forward, elbows on her knees. Mira, she said quietly, I need you to understand what's happening. That knife just defeated a council-standard plasma weapon in front of 37 species representatives. Do you know what that means? Mira's throat tightened. That earth steel is stronger than they thought. It means every species in the council is now asking the same question. What else did humanity build during the collapse that we haven't disclosed? Kael'thar's eyes were hard. We've spent 50 years convincing the council we're not a threat, that our weapons tech is primitive, that we pose no military challenge. You just proved them wrong in the most public way possible. I didn't mean, I know, Kael'thar's tone softened, but intent doesn't matter, results do. And the result is that half the council thinks we've been hiding some kind of super material and the other half thinks we're too ignorant to understand what we've made. She sighed. Either way, we've got a problem. Mira looked down at her bandaged arm. So what happens now? The council's tech committee will run tests. If they can't figure out why the blade resisted plasma, they'll demand access to Earth's historical forges. All of them. Kael'thar's voice was grim. They'll want to see how we made it, and if we can make more. Can we? Kael'thar spread her hands. I don't know, do you? Mira thought of her great-grandfather's journal, the entries about forging tools in makeshift smithies, coal fires, and salvaged iron. He'd written about the process: heat, hammer, quench, but never called it special. It was just survival. Maybe, she said slowly. But I don't think my great-grandfather knew he was making anything unique. He was just trying not to starve. Then we'd better hope the council's scientists can figure it out, Kael'thar said. Because if they can't, and they decide we're a threat, she didn't finish the sentence. Mira understood. The council had glassed 2 rebellious colonies in the last century. They called it quarantine protocol. No one survived a quarantine. The door irised open again. This time it wasn't Zhao, it was Kael'thar. The warlord had to duck to fit through the entrance, his crested head nearly brushing the ceiling. His leg wound was fully sealed now, the biofoam replaced with a sleek polymer brace. He moved slowly, deliberately, and stopped just inside the threshold. Kael'thar stood immediately, positioning herself between Mira and the warlord. This is a restricted medical area. I am aware. Kael'thar's translator crackled softly. I invoked council right of parley. The referee granted me 5 minutes. For what purpose? Kael'thar's 3 eyes fixed on Mira. To speak with the one who defeated me. Kael'thar's posture didn't relax, but she stepped aside. Mira swung her legs off the bed, ignoring the protest from her thigh, and stood. You didn't lose, she said. You conceded, because continuing would have been suicide. Kael'thar's mandibles clicked amusement, Mira thought. I am a warrior, Cadet Chen, not a fool. 4 blades or 3, the outcome would have been the same. Your steel would have broken them all. I don't know why it did that, nor do I. But I know what I saw. He moved closer, limping slightly, and lowered himself into a crouch so they were eye level. I have fought in 17 campaigns. I have faced plasma cannons, molecular disruptors, singularity mines. None of them frightened me. His voice dropped. But your blade, that frightened me. Mira's pulse quickened. Why? Because it should not exist. Kael'thar gestured toward the viewport, toward the sprawl of Nexus Prime. The council built its power on energy weapons. Plasma, particle beams, resonance disruptors, all designed to break matter at the molecular level. For 10,000 cycles, that technology has been absolute, unstoppable. He paused, and then a human child brings a piece of old iron and shatters the paradigm. It's just steel, Mira said, though her voice wavered. No, Kael'thar's 3 eyes narrowed. It is proof that the Council's supremacy is fragile, that our weapons are not invincible, that somewhere in your species' history you learned to forge something we cannot break. He leaned closer. Do you understand what that means, cadet? You have made us afraid. Kael'thar's hand went to her wrist, calm, ready to call for enforcers, but Kael'thar straightened, raising his 4 hands in a gesture of peace. I did not come to threaten, I came to warn. He looked at Mira. The Council will not let this knowledge spread. They will bury your blade, classify it, and ensure no one replicates it. Or, his mandibles clicked sharply, they will bury you alongside it. Are you saying they'd kill her? Kael'thar's voice was ice. I am saying the Council has ended threats before. Kael'thar turned toward the door. Whether they see Cadet Chen as a threat depends on what their tests reveal and what your species does next. He paused at the threshold. For what it is worth, I hope they find only iron and carbon for all our sakes. Then he was gone, the door irising shut. The Council's technical report arrived 6 hours later, transmitted directly to Ambassador Kael'thar's secure terminal. Mira sat across from her in the embassy's shielded briefing room, watching the ambassador's expression shift from tense to confused to outright baffled as she read. Finally, Kael'thar looked up. They can't explain it. Mira leaned forward. What do they mean, they can't explain it? I mean exactly that. Kael'thar turned the terminal screen so Mira could see. They've run every test in their database: molecular resonance, quantum phase analysis, isotopic decay mapping. The blade's composition is exactly what you said. Carbon steel, iron, and carbon in standard ratios, trace chromium from environmental contamination. No exotic elements, no energy fields, no nanostructures. She scrolled through pages of data. But when they tried to replicate the plasma shatter effect with a forged sample of identical composition, it failed. The plasma cut straight through. Mira's chest tightened. So what's different? They don't know. Kael'thar pulled up a supplementary file, this one dense with graphs and spectrographic images. They've got one hypothesis, but it's strange. They think the resistance might be related to the forging process itself, not the material, but how it was made. How do you make steel different? You don't, not chemically. Kael'thar tapped a graph showing crystalline grain structures. But the way you heat and cool metal, the number of times you fold and hammer it, the carbon exposure during quenching, all of that affects the internal grain structure, the microscopic lattice that gives the steel its strength. She zoomed in on an image of the blade's cross-section, magnified 10,000 times. Your great-grandfather's knife has an incredibly tight, uniform grain pattern, almost impossibly tight. The Council's analysts think that might be why the plasma blade couldn't disrupt it. Mira studied the image. The grains looked like tiny interlocking bricks, no gaps, no irregularities. So it's the craftsmanship? Maybe, but here's the problem. Kael'thar pulled up another file, this one a list of Earth's surviving collapse-era forges, 23 sites scattered across 5 continents. The Council's demanding access to these locations. They want to see if other blades from that period show the same properties, and if they do, she met Mira's gaze, they'll classify the forging techniques as restricted technology and shut down any efforts to replicate them. Can they do that? Under Council law, yes. Kael'thar's voice was tight. If a member species develops a material that poses a systemic defense risk, the Council can invoke the preservation doctrine. It's supposed to prevent arms races. In practice, it means the Council gets to decide what humanity is allowed to make. Mira's hands curled into fists. That's insane. That's politics. Kael'thar closed the terminal, but there's a chance, a small one, that we can argue against it. If we can prove the forging process wasn't designed to create plasma resistance, that it's a natural byproduct of pre-industrial metalwork, then maybe we can classify it as cultural heritage instead of weapons tech. She paused, but that requires evidence. And testimony. From who? From someone who knows how those blades were made. Kael'thar leaned back in her chair. Does your family have any records, letters, videos, anything from your great-grandfather about his forge work? Mira thought of the journal, the worn notebook she'd kept in her duffel. Most of the entries were sparse dates, whether catch counts, but there were a few pages near the end, written in shakier handwriting, where he described the forging process, not because it was important, but because he was teaching her grandmother. I have his journal, she said. It's back at the academy in my quarters. Kael'thar's eyes sharpened. Can you get it? If you authorize transit clearance, yeah, done. Kael'thar was already typing on her wrist comm. I'll have you on a shuttle within the hour. Bring the journal back here. We'll need to digitize it and submit it as part of our formal response to the council. She hesitated. But Mira, be careful. If the council thinks you're hiding something, they'll interpret it as confirmation that the blade was a weapon. Everything you do right now is being watched. Mira nodded, throat dry. I understand. Good. Kael'thar stood. Go pack. And Mira, she put a hand on Mira's shoulder. What you did in that arena, it was brave, but bravery doesn't always protect you, especially not here. The shuttle ride to the Academy station took 3 hours, most of it spent in the silent hum of sublight engines. Mira sat in the passenger bay, staring out the viewport at the streaked stars. Her left arm still throbbed under the bandage, and her mind kept replaying the moment the plasma blade shattered, the thunderclap, the spray of violet sparks, Kael'thar's expression of disbelief. She thought the duel would be the end of it. Win or lose, she'd have proven something, that humanity was worth its council seat, that Earth could stand on equal footing with species 10 millennia older. Instead, she'd opened a fracture in the council's certainty, and now everyone was scrambling to contain the fallout. The shuttle docked at the Academy's main hub, a spinning ring station that housed 2,000 cadets from 40 species. Mira disembarked quickly, avoiding eye contact with the handful of other humans in the corridors. Word had spread fast. She could feel their stares, hear the whispered conversations that cut off when she passed. Her quarters were in Section D, a cramped module with a fold-down bunk and a single storage locker. She thumbed the lock and stepped inside, letting the door seal behind her. The space smelled faintly of recycled air and her own unwashed laundry. The journal was where she'd left it, tucked into the false bottom of her duffel beneath a spare jumpsuit. She pulled it out and sat on the bunk, running her fingers over the cracked leather cover. Her great-grandfather's name was embossed on the front in faded gold. Thomas Chen, 2187-2251. She opened it to the first page. The handwriting was tight, economical. January 12, 2223. Lake froze early this year. Caught 6 perch through the ice. Sarah says the supply truck might not come until March. Need to ration, mundane, survival. She flipped forward, skimming entries about weather, repairs, the slow work of rebuilding after the contact wars. Then near the end, she found the pages she remembered. July 8, 2247. Taught Lily how to forge a blade today. She's 10, old enough to understand. Took scrap iron from the old tractor, heated it in the coal forge until it glowed orange. She held the tongs while I hammered. 3 hours of work for a 6-inch blade, but it held an edge. Quenched it in the lake. She asked why we do it this way. Told her because it's all we have, and because steel doesn't lie. Mira's eyes stung. She'd never met her great-grandfather. He'd died when her mother was young, but she'd grown up on stories about him. The quiet man who'd rebuilt a life from ashes, who'd taught his children to make and mend and endure. She kept reading. The next few entries detailed specific techniques, heating temperatures, hammer rhythms, the precise moment to plunge hot steel into water. He'd written it all down not as instructions, but as a record, a way to pass something forward. On the last page, dated a week before his death, he'd written, "The council says our tools are obsolete. Maybe they're right. Their machines can do in seconds what takes me days. But I think we lose something when we forget how to make things with our hands. When we forget that every blade, every tool, every piece of steel carries the sweat and patience of the person who forged it. That's not obsolete. That's what makes us human." Mira closed the journal carefully. Her hands were shaking. A knock echoed through the door. She tensed, then opened it a crack. Commander Zhao stood in the corridor, expression unreadable. "Cadet Chen, the ambassador sent me to escort you back. I'm coming." Mira grabbed the journal and stepped into the hall, sealing her quarters behind her. Zhao didn't speak until they were halfway to the docking bay. Then, without looking at her, he said, "I read the council's report." Mira kept walking. And I think they're missing the point." Zhao's voice was quiet. "They're looking for some kind of technological trick, a hidden variable. But what if there isn't one? What if your great-grandfather just knew how to make good steel?" Mira glanced at him. "Would that be enough?" "For the council, no." Zhao's jaw tightened. "But for us, maybe." He stopped at the airlock, palming the access panel. "The council's been telling humanity what we can and can't build for 50 years. They've classified our fusion drives, restricted our shipyards, capped our fleet sizes. All in the name of stability. He turned to face her. But if a 100-year-old knife can break their best weapons, what does that say about their stability? That it's built on assumptions, Mira said slowly. Exactly, Zhao's eyes were hard, and assumptions break. The council convened in the Grand Chamber 3 days later, a vast amphitheater carved into the heart of Nexus Prime's central station, its walls lined with holographic screens displaying every member species' homeworld. Mira stood at the petitioner's platform, a circular dais in the chamber's center, with Ambassador Kael'thar and Commander Zhao flanking her. Above them, arrayed in tiered seating that rose like canyon walls, sat the delegates, Vorath in their chitinous clusters, Seraphine perched on luminous branches, towering Kryn with their crystalline carapaces. At the highest tier, the council arbiters, 7 ancient beings from the founding species, watched in silence. The chief arbiter, a Viren whose body shimmered like liquid mercury, activated the chamber's acoustics. Their voice resonated from every surface. We convene to address Incident 947 Theta, the deployment of unregistered energy-resistant material in sanctioned combat. Cadet Mira Chen, you are called to testify. Mira stepped forward. Her dress uniform felt too tight, her injured arm stiff under the sleeve. She'd rehearsed this with Kael'thar a dozen times, but standing here, beneath the weight of 37 species scrutiny, her mind went blank. Then she thought of her great-grandfather's journal tucked into her uniform pocket. Arbiters, she began, voice steady. The blade I used in the Grand Duel was not a weapon. It was a tool, made by my great-grandfather during Earth's collapse when my species had no access to galactic technology. He forged it from scrap iron and coal fire because that's all he had. The chief arbiter's form rippled, yet it defeated council-standard plasma weaponry. Explain this discrepancy. I can't, not scientifically. Mira pulled out the journal, held it up. But I can tell you how it was made. My great-grandfather documented his process. With your permission, I'd like to share it. A murmur ran through the chamber, mandibles clicking, wings rustling. The chief arbiter conferred silently with the other arbiters, then gestured assent. Proceed. Mira opened the journal to the marked page and read aloud, translating her great-grandfather's handwriting into the chamber's lingua franca. She described the coal forge, the hours of heating and hammering, the quenching in lake water. As she spoke, the chamber's holographic screens displayed magnified images of the blade's grain structure, overlaid with her words. When she finished, the chamber was silent. Then a Vorath delegate stood, mandibles flaring. This is absurdity. Primitive metallurgy cannot produce advanced materials. It wasn't advanced, Mira said. It was basic, just steel. Then why does it resist plasma? The Vorath gestured at the screens. Your own species scientists cannot replicate the effect, because they're using modern forges. Automated hammers controlled atmospheres, precise temperatures. Mira looked up at the delegates. My great-grandfather didn't have any of that. He worked by hand, by instinct, by trial and error. Maybe, she hesitated, maybe the difference is that he wasn't trying to make something special. He was just trying to make something that would last. A Seraphine observer unfurled its wings. You suggest unintentional excellence? I suggest that craftsmanship isn't about technology, it's about care. Mira thought of the journal's last entry. Every blade my great-grandfather made carried his patience, his attention. He didn't rush, he didn't cut corners, he cared about the steel. Her voice strengthened. Maybe that's what the council's scientists are missing. You can't replicate care, you can't automate it, you just have to do the work. The chief arbiter's form stilled. You claim the blade's properties arise from artisan variance. I claim they arise from the fact that my great-grandfather gave a damn. Mira met the arbiter's gaze, or what passed for it. The council's been building weapons for 10,000 years, but you've forgotten how to build tools. There's a difference. The chamber erupted. Delegates were on their feet, shouting across tiers, some in support, others in outrage. The chief arbiter raised a shimmering appendage, and silence crashed down like a hammer. This testimony will be analyzed. The council will deliberate. The arbiter turned their focus to Mira. However, Cadet Chen, you must understand, if your blade's properties are replicable, the preservation doctrine will apply. Humanity will be required to surrender all collapse-era forging records and cease production of similar materials. Kael'thar stepped forward. Arbiters, we contest that application. The blade in question is a cultural artifact, not a weapons prototype. Restricting its creation is equivalent to banning human heritage. Cultural artifacts do not shatter military-grade weapons, a Kryn delegate rumbled from the upper tiers. If Earth possesses the knowledge to produce such materials, the Council must regulate it. That is law. Then change the law. The voice came from the chamber's entrance. Every head turned. Kael'thar stood at the threshold, his four-armed frame silhouetted against the corridor light. He wore no armor, just simple robes, and his injured leg was still braced. He limped forward, stopping at the edge of the petitioner's platform. The chief arbiter's form flickered with surprise. "Warlord Kael'thar, you were not summoned. I invoke right of witness." "I was present at the Blade's deployment. I have testimony to offer." The arbiter rippled uncertainty. Mira thought. "Speak." Kael'thar turned to face the assembled delegates. "I have fought for my people for 30 cycles. I have seen plasma cannons melt starship hulls. I have seen particle beams turn flesh to ash. I believed, as you all believed, that our weapons were absolute." He paused. "The human's blade taught me otherwise, but not because it is a weapon, because it is a truth." "Explain," the chief arbiter demanded. "The Council's power rests on technological superiority. We use energy weapons because they are efficient, scalable, mass-produced. We have forgotten or chosen to forget that efficiency is not the same as strength." Kael'thar gestured at Mira. "This human's ancestor made a blade with no machines, no algorithms, no quantum forges. Just fire and metal and his own 2 hands. And that blade broke my weapon because it was made with something we no longer value: patience." He looked up at the tiered seating, his 3 eyes sweeping across the delegates. "If you classify her blade as a threat, you admit that your weapons are fragile, that your supremacy is an illusion. Is that the truth you wish to enshrine in Council law?" The chamber was utterly silent. The chief arbiter's form shimmered, cycling through colors, silver to gold to deep blue. Finally, they spoke. "The Warlord's testimony is noted. The Council will deliberate in closed session. Cadet Chen, you are dismissed." Mira didn't move. "What about my blade?" "It remains in Council custody pending final ruling." "That's not an answer." The chief arbiter's form hardened. "It is the only answer you will receive. Dismissed." Kael'thar gripped Mira's shoulder and steered her toward the exit. They walked in silence through the station's corridors, past clusters of delegates murmuring in a dozen languages. Commander Zhao trailed behind, face unreadable. When they reached the embassy's shielded wing, Kael'thar finally spoke. "You did well in there." "Did I?" Mira's voice was hollow. "They're still going to take it. The blade, the records, all of it. Maybe." Kael'thar palmed the door to her office, ushering them inside. "But you made them question themselves. That's not nothing." Zhao crossed his arms. "Kael'thar's testimony helped. If he's willing to admit the Council's weapons are fallible, that changes the calculus." "Or it makes them more afraid," Kael'thar said. She sat heavily behind her desk. "Fear makes people do stupid things." Mira sank into a chair, exhaustion crashing over her. Her arm throbbed, her leg ached, and the weight of the last 3 days pressed down like atmospheric pressure. She thought of her great-grandfather, alone in his forge, shaping steel by firelight. He'd never imagined his work would end up here, in a galactic courtroom, dissected by species who measured value in energy signatures and quantum states. "What happens if they rule against us?" she asked quietly. Kael'thar met her gaze. "Then we appeal, and if the appeal fails, we comply. But we document everything, every forge they shut down, every record they confiscate. We make sure history remembers what the Council did. And if they come for more," Zhao's voice was tight, "if they decide Earth's entire industrial base is a threat, then we fight." Kael'thar's tone was flat. "Diplomatically, legally, every way we can, but we fight." Mira closed her eyes. She'd volunteered for the duel to prove humanity's worth. Instead, she'd proven its vulnerability. And now the Council had a choice: acknowledge that their supremacy was fragile or crush the evidence and move on. She knew which choice empires usually made. The Council's ruling came 18 hours later, transmitted as an encrypted file to Kael'thar's terminal. Mira stood beside her as the ambassador opened it, both of them silent. Zhao was across the room, pacing. Kael'thar read the document once, then twice. Then she looked up, and Mira saw something unexpected on her face: relief. "They're returning the blade." Mira's heart stuttered. "What?" "Under amended classification as cultural heritage artifact with non-replicable properties." Kael'thar scrolled through the ruling. "They've determined that the forging process cannot be standardized or mass-produced, and therefore poses no systemic defense risk. The blade is being reclassified from restricted technology to protected cultural item. You get it back, and they're lifting restrictions on collapse-era forge documentation. Zhao stopped pacing. Are you serious? It's right here. Kael'thar turned the screen so they could see. 5 of the 7 arbiters voted in favor. The dissent came from the Kryn and Vorath delegates, but they were outvoted. Mira felt tears prick her eyes. Why, what changed? This. Kael'thar pulled up a supplemental file, a statement from the Council's Ethics Committee. Kael'thar's testimony triggered a review of the preservation doctrine. The committee concluded that classifying artisan-produced materials as weapons technology sets a dangerous precedent. It would effectively allow the Council to regulate any handmade object which violates member species' cultural autonomy rights. She smiled, thin but genuine. They chose principles over paranoia, this time. Zhao let out a breath. So we won. We survived, Kael'thar corrected. There's a difference. Mira wiped her eyes. When can I get the blade back? You'll need to sign custody transfer forms and submit to a final scan, probably tomorrow. Kael'thar stood, extending a hand. Congratulations, cadet. You did something no one thought possible. You made the Council blink. Mira shook her hand, but her mind was elsewhere. She thought of her great-grandfather's journal, the last entry. That's what makes us human. He'd been right. Not because humanity was special, but because caring about steel, about work, about the people who'd use what you made, was a choice anyone could make. The Council had just chosen to remember that, for now. The blade was returned to Mira in a quiet ceremony, just her and Ambassador Kael'thar in the embassy's small courtyard, a dome-covered garden with earth plants, real soil shipped at exorbitant cost from home. The containment case sat on a stone bench between them. Kael'thar opened it and Mira lifted the knife out, feeling its familiar weight settle into her palm. It was unchanged. The edge still gleamed, the leather grip still warm. No scorch marks, no damage, just steel forged a century ago by hands she'd never held. How does it feel? Kael'thar asked. Mira turned the blade, watching light catch along its length, like it never left. Good. Kael'thar handed her a leather sheath, new but made in the old style. The Council added one condition to its return: you're prohibited from using it in any future sanctioned combat. It's classified as heritage, not equipment. Mira slid the blade into the sheath. I can live with that. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the soft hum of the courtyard's environmental systems. Then Kael'thar said, "What will you do now? You've got 6 months left at the academy. After that, you could apply for any post in Teragov. After what you did, doors will open." Mira thought about it. The academy had felt like a cage before the duel, protocols and regulations, endless drills designed to make humans fit into the Council's military frameworks. But now, sitting here with her great-grandfather's blade at her side, she felt something shift. I think, she said slowly, I want to go home, to Earth, find the forges my great-grandfather wrote about and see if anyone's still making blades the old way. She looked at Kael'thar. The Council ruled the process can't be mass-produced, but that doesn't mean it has to die. Kael'thar smiled. You want to become a blacksmith? I want to remember how. Mira ran her thumb along the sheath. The Council almost erased this because they couldn't quantify it. I don't want that to happen to anything else we made, so yeah. I'll finish the academy, then I'll go back and learn to forge steel, teach it to others if they're interested. That's a slow path, Kael'thar said. Not much glory in it. Neither was gutting fish on Lake Superior. Mira's smile was faint. But my great-grandfather did it anyway. Word of the Council's ruling spread quickly. Within a week, Mira's story had jumped from diplomatic briefings to public news feeds across the Council's networks. Human media called her a hero. Alien commentators were more cautious, framing the duel as an anomaly, a fluke that wouldn't recur. But in the quiet spaces, academy mess halls, embassy lounges, civilian transports, people talked. Mira overheard 2 Seraphine cadets debating it in the academy's common area. The human's blade wasn't superior tech, one insisted, wings flickering with agitation. It was just old, she got lucky. Then why couldn't the warlord break it? The other replied, because, the first Seraphine paused, mandibles clicking uncertainly, because plasma weapons aren't designed to face that kind of material. Exactly, we designed our weapons to beat each other, not to beat something made without our assumptions. Mira kept walking, but the conversation stayed with her. The Seraphine was right. The Council had spent millennia refining weapons to counter weapons. They'd optimized for their own paradigms, never considering that something outside those paradigms might resist. Her great-grandfather hadn't been trying to resist anything. He'd just been making a knife that would last, and in doing so, he'd accidentally built something the Council's entire technological framework couldn't break. That wasn't luck. That was the difference between making things for war and making things to endure.